All right, let's talk about the Inca. This is a presentation about the ways in which the Inca established and maintained control over their empire. There will be some things that are kind of left out. It's a remarkable people who accomplished and built really remarkable things. Like for instance, some of you may be familiar with and may have visited Machu Picchu. Um, as an example, Machu Picchu is not represented in this presentation. This presentation is really going to be focused on the again the tools of empire, which is what I'm saying. Um, that's not to say that Machu Picchu isn't some sort of consequence of empire. Um, Save that for another presentation. All right, let's talk about the Inca. All right, before I get started, um, in the spirit of giving credit, I do really want to offer my sincere gratitude to one of my teachers and mentors, Dr. Catherine Julian, who I had the great pleasure of working under. She was part of my committee um, when I got my degree in history, my MA. She sadly passed away far too young, only 61, but she's just a really remarkable teacher in person. She's an Andean scholar. That's Andean, refers to the Andes with a focus on the Incas. So, again, she sort of inspired my curiosity and interest in the Inca. And so, with no further ado, let's chat. Okay, the Inca in time and space. All right, let's situate them. All right. Um, if we look back in the earlier histories of South America and in the regions in which the Inca are interested, which is based primarily in Peru, you have the Wari Empire. And the Wari went for 500 years. It was ultimately, and you'll see, much smaller than what the Inca Empire would become, but you'll also see that it lasted quite a bit longer, 500 years. Um, and the Inca Empire was only about 100 and not even. Okay. And even prior to that, you had an interim period of almost 340 years as well. So, in the greater context of things, I guess what I'd like you to get from this slide is that the Inca Empire only existed for a very short amount of time. There was an Inca society or civilization prior to 1438. Um, that said, the empire itself, when it decided it's going to conquer and absorb neighboring peoples, right? And not just stay in that area around Cusco, which we'll see. Um, that was the empire, and it was actually quite short. Okay. Um, and this is actually when you see what they accomplished, it actually makes it even more remarkable the fact that they're able to do this in such a short amount of time. And you'll see there are some pretty general dates here, right? 600 to 1100, 1100 to 1438. Then that gets really specific, right? And I should say that this date is built from Spanish records. Spanish conquistadors, led by Pizarro, would ultimately put an end to the Inca Empire in 1533. The Spanish records are what we rely upon actually to work backwards to establish 1438. And I'll talk more about 1438 later on. All right. And all these dates are CE, that is Common Era. Okay, so 1533 is about 500 years ago, right? All right, the Inca Empire. Here is these are modern nations, obviously, which were not in place at the time of the Inca Empire. But I do want to give you a sense of where the Inca Empire was. Um, if it were modern day, right? It would be Colombia through Ecuador and Peru, um, into Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. All right, even as far south as Mendoza Valley. All right. So it's stretched a good bit. All right. Some parts not included, for instance, the Amazon. All right. These peoples, as we'll see, were situated in and around the Andes Mountains, not in that forested region. That's not to say that they didn't engage some sort of trade with those regions, particularly for timber, as well as bird feathers, tropical birds, were very important as well for their garments. All right. Um, so this is what it looks like. Inca Empire, and I did indicate to you that this is quite a bit larger than the Wari Empire, which operated from about 600 to 1100, with its largest time period around 800, and that would have been this area right here. Okay. So you will see it is quite a bit larger. All right. This was quite coastal. They worked in away from the coast and also north and south. All right. So that is the space and time. Um, this is really, and this is what we're gonna see, and this like plays into the real, I guess, challenges of the Inca Empire, which is consolidating what's essentially a vertical landscape. These are the Andes Mountains. We're talking about pretty significant elevation, which I'll sort of indicate later on. But these sites, you have the coasts, and then you have the mountaintops, and you have places in between, and you have an empire which essentially consolidated that. All right. The Because it's such an interesting vertical landscape, you have such ecological diversity. So, what did that mean for the Incas? And I've sort of laid it out for you, the different kinds of resources that one would have at the different levels. In the highlands, you'd have potatoes, quinoa. Quinoa is actually a Quechua word. Quechua, Quechua, I believe that's the spelling. It's a modern language as well. People who are descendants of the Inca and in Peru still speak Quechua. They also speak Spanish, but Quechua being their indigenous language and one of the larger indigenous languages that's still spoken today. But anyway, quinoa, a word that you're likely familiar with, is a Quechua word and a very important food for the Inca. Probably not as important as potatoes, all right, but also very important. Because it is a little colder up there, you could also sustain barley, llamas and alpacas, as far as for, all sorts of things important. Their furs, their meats. These are pack animals, right? So important for transportation. All right, the valleys. This was sort of the optimal zone for agriculture. So you get maize or corn. All right. Um, Corn is something that the Inca had, and even prior societies had. It was engineered and developed north in what's modern day Mexico. It wasn't quite as important as potatoes as far as the ability to feed masses, but corn was very important. For a lot of reasons. Cultural, they made beer out of it as well, which was an important piece for festivals, Inca festivals. You get beans, all kinds of fruits, all right, pineapples, avocado, guava, lots of fruits. Okay, and now you have in the lowlands, the tropical lowlands. You have coca, all right, which was a stimulant, allowed people to work. It's not obviously, you may be familiar with how cocaine is made out of coca. There's a lot of processes that go into that. The Inca were not doing cocaine, let's be clear about that. But they were chewing coca leaves, which acted as a stimulant. Lowlands also, you had a lot of birds. Again, birds and feathers were so important in the sort of visual culture of the Inca, um, and also timber. Finally, you have the coasts, seafood. You had cotton being grown near the coasts, again, also for garment use. This is one of those, again, this isn't all about the Inca. This is mostly interested in empire ultimately. If I were talking more about, I guess, the elements of civilization, our earlier presentations, the topic of those, I'd go into the importance of Inca textiles, not just made out of the animals, but also the cotton as well. It's pretty remarkable um, textile manufacturing or production. Okay, reeds, salt, guano, which is like a seabird poop, which was used as fertilizer. So these are just some of the things you can see from the different zones, from the higher elevations to the lower elevations to also the coastal areas. All right, ecologically diverse. There are very also one other very special region that has its own sort of ecosystem as well. Aside from these, Lake Titicaca. All right, a stunning lake. All right, here, by the way, take a moment to talk about the terracing. All right, Terracing, the terracing or the terraces. Um, I know some of you have gone to Vietnam. Again, you sort of have a mountainous area. In order to make the greatest agricultural use out of your space, you create these terraces. All right. If you don't create these terraces, all the wonderful soil you have up here, once it rains, will just go right down into the valley, right? But if you create these terraces, you don't get that erosion or that slide with all that great soil. It retains it and keeps it there. So you see these wonderful steps, and these are definitely an agricultural technology, not um, invented by the Inca, but I would say in many ways really perfected by the Inca. Really wonderful systems of terracing. And it's hard to see here, but you should imagine these are lined with stone walls. The stone also allows for um, uh, sort of a greater flow of water among this. Anyway, it's really important the way it sort of retains the water and doesn't allow it just to go all the way down. All right, more on Lake Titicaca. Let's talk about how what a unique and brilliant lake this is. All right, it is large, 3,230 square miles. All right. Um, by comparison, Lake Washington is 33 square miles, so approximately 10 times as big as Lake Washington. I should also say that the locals um, thought that the lake was shaped like a puma, I don't know, grabbing a rabbit or something. I'll let you figure that out on your own. But this sort of puma imagery is going to come up later on as well. Um, I'm not talking about Inca religion, but Inca religion identified sort of three different animals who dominated the different spheres. And you had the Andean condor that dominates the skies. You have the puma, which dominates the earth. And then you have the snake, which uh, I guess is the subterranean representative. All right. That's a bit of a rabbit trail. But anyway, a large lake. This is 12,507 feet above sea level. By comparison, I think Mount Rainier is about 14,400 square feet or so. So it's only about 2,000 square feet, feet above sea level, rather. So it's only about a couple 2,000 feet lower elevation than the peak of Mount Rainier that you have this. Um, because of the great size of the lake, it does create a warmer microclimate, so people are able to live in and around there. Currently, there are about 230,000 inhabitants in the Lake Titicaca area, so it's continues to be uh, a populated area. Again, very high, right? And because it's just a unique place, it has 530 different aquatic species, pretty variable. 90% of the fish are endemic. In other words, you'll only find those fish there. Okay, they are not found in other places. They're only found there. Um, I got a special frog for you as well. This is a Lake Titicaca water frog. All right, I thought that was unique. All right, let's. I guess after we've established when this empire was, set it in its larger historical context. We've also looked at the space that it dominated, as well as sort of the ecological uh, niches that sort of also exist. All right, let's talk about the emergence of the empire. And I did mention that date of 1438. Oops, I'm not quite there yet. This is actually a picture of the capital, the Inca capital, Cusco. You can, this is clearly not what it looked like during Inca time. You can definitely see the Spanish influence. Um, Again, Spain, I did mention in 1533, conquered um, the Inca in the same way that Cortez was a conquistador from Spain who conquered the Aztecs. Pizarro was a conquistador from Spain who conquered the Inca. Okay, Cusco is called the city of the Puma. All right, there's that Puma again. Well, why was it called that? Here's sort of an aerial view of the city, and you can see that is shaped like a puma. The back, as well as sort of these leg areas, these are rivers that converge at the point of the tail. All right, this is actually, I guess, properly outside, but a very important courtyard. Not courtyard's not the right word, but what's the word I'm looking for? Like a town square. And it was also called the Heart of the Puma. Up here, you actually have a really important temple who operates right at the head, right up there. And I don't think this is coincidental at all. So the Puma dominates the earth, and here you have the capital city for the Inca people, who create the city of the Puma, which is Cusco. All right. Well, what was going on in Cusco that started the Inca Empire? Um, the Inca were being attacked by a neighboring civilization or people called the Chanca. And it was grave to the point where Prince Pachacuti, his father, who was the Inca at the time, or the Sapa Inca, Sapa Inca, that's sort of the literally means the unique Inca, but it's essentially the number one. Um, the king, the pharaoh, um, the czar, I don't know. But anyway, it's the number one person. He was a prince. His father fled. All right. So leaving Pachacuti to defend the city. And he successfully beat back the Chanca and destroyed the Chanca, reclaimed the capital city of Cusco. And then from this time in 1438, and again, this is, I guess, where historians are curious and wonder, but this launched Pachacuti into imperial ambitions, in which they were no longer content with just Cusco, but they were going to conquer and incorporate neighboring peoples under his leadership. Okay, and that's what ultimately makes this imperial. Was it, confidence from a battle hard fought? Was it fear that other peoples could come in and take over Cusco, and they wanted sort of a buffer zones to protect the city? Whatever those motives were, is maybe less clear. But the reality is that Pachacuti ended up really being that sort of main driver for extending the boundaries to where we saw the map of the Inca Empire reaching again as far as Mendoza Valley, up even to parts of Colombia. It's a really quite a large place. This is a statue that's in Cusco today, and Pachacuti continues to be sort of emblematic of indigenous resistance and pride. Um, and so you see more modern artistic portrayals as well, like this one, which I think is actually quite beautiful. All right. Okay, Pachkuri. Okay, so that was, I guess, the beginnings of the empire. How did the Inca Empire build and maintain control of the area? And this is again ours. This is really sort of our driving questions that we're going to be looking at um, for this unit. Not just with the Inca, you'll have some other case studies that you look at. But let's take a look at the Inca first. All right, let's start out with military might. We've kind of already even talked about this, right? The Inca, their weapons are from some dystopian thriller. All right, you got this bat with these stone studs in it, like a club with, again, stone studs. I mentioned that the Inca were really talented with textiles. So textiles represented some of their weaponry as well. So they have some range with these slings. All right. And then here you have what's a stone mace. You should imagine a wood handle like this attached to that. And you have sort of an axe here, and then this sort of mace piece around it as well. Just really brutal weapons. All right. Um, for all intents and purposes, this is really sort of a Stone Age culture, society. The Inca did use bronze in limited fashions. There was no iron. All right, that is an important piece. Much of the bronze was used for tools and farming and equipment. Much of the weaponry was stone. All right, I guess the stone work. among the Inca is remarkable, and maybe entertain a rabbit trail here real quick. But this is um, an outside wall to an Inca structure, and the seams are so tight. Look at the seams, they're beautiful. Masonry, we're familiar with today. You have these stones, you put that sort of binding mortar, right, between them to stick them together. The Inca did not use mortar. In some cases, they may have used a little bit on the interiors, but for the most part, there is no mortar at all. These stones are just honed to fit perfectly. All right. And, it's not just executed really well, but, or I would say efficiently, um, but also there are really wonderful and beautiful elements of artistic expression. I don't know if you can see a figure in this image or not. I'll give you a moment to look. But the stonemason here, didn't just build a great wall, but also embedded a really cool picture within it. It's a puma. There are pumas everywhere, man. There's a little ear. There's this beautiful tail. I'll go back here so you can take another look. See if you caught it. Right? Um, there you go. Did I cut the tail off a little bit? Let me see. Where's the tail? Yeah, I think so it goes up like that. You. All right. There's our puma. Um. Apparently, there's a snake here. I am told. I feel like I see the snake, but again, I'm not completely sure. Right? Is this part of it? Is it coiled? Is that the head? Would the head be around the corner? I don't know. I need more information. I'm told this is a snake. This is actually part of the temple that is a part of the Puma's head in Cusco. I showed you that map earlier, right? This is a part of that structure for that very, very, very important temple. All right. If you're seeing a snake, I'd like for you to tell me how you see the snake. Oh, and a paw. All right, there we go. A paw. I know some of you are probably like, it's not even a paw, it's just like incidentally there. No, it's a paw. These Inca Masons are on point, all right? They take pride in their work. All right. That was a little bit of I guess, a rabbit trail as I was talking about the stone weapons, but I did want to slip in the stone masonry, and just the importance of that and the beauty of that, really. All right. Okay. Other ways in which the Inca built, consolidated, maintained control over the peoples. The Ayu, the Mita, and the Kolka systems. All right, let's talk about these. The Ayu is a sort of a social organization. I mean, again, think about this. These are, again, we're in the Andes here. This is a vertical landscape which creates these discrete parts, right? With potentially limited interactions with others as well, right? Because you have these smaller areas with that are divided by mountains. It can make these IUs, or these different social organizations, somewhat self-sufficient. Okay. Um, So the IU again is that sort of, it's not a small family, it's not even quite an extended family, but it's a collection of different groups with their extended families who govern a certain region. And the IU would be in charge of, you know, taking care of doing their produce. Certainly. Depending on, again, if you think about that earlier slide about the different elevations, you might be cultivating beans, you might be cultivating coca, all right? Obviously, you wouldn't just be doing one thing, you'd be doing a few things. But the IU then, it wouldn't just be like produce as well, okay? So maybe your IU based on sort of family skills that have been trained over generations. You might be more talented in creating garments or textiles. You might be more talented in making jewelry. You might be more talented in these farming duties as well. All right. So, based on your IU, it's a little group um, that essentially maintains their areas. And they also collect surplus. Okay. And the surplus that they create, and this is part of the Inca system. All right. The IU had always been in place. But when the Inca came, one thing was they said that the IU would no longer have their own militaries. The militaries would all be Inca. All right. That's something they took from the IU, they took away from the IU. But then they also established these colcas. And the kolka are storage houses. So there was a need for the IUs to create surplus, and then they would put them in these storage systems, and then they would be shipped and traded all throughout the empire. All right. So this IU, who maybe creates great textiles, um, would put their textiles in here, and then the Inca administration would be able to note that and transport it to areas that might be in need of textiles. And if they're in need of fruits or armaments, they might bring that there. Then I don't know. It's a really cool system of redistribution. And that was facilitated by the Inca Empire. All right, so that's what the IU is. Small group. They're in charge, it's regionally based. They're in charge of maintaining their fields and their areas, and then also contributing to the kolkas. And then this is almost like a tribute, right? That the imperial forces, the empire would then take and redistribute. And again, it's not at no cost, because things from other kolkas and different IUs would also be returned to this area as well. So they were really facilitating trade, and incorporating these IUs into a larger system, right? So they weren't totally self governing, they were also part of a larger system. And you can imagine that would be frustrating for an IU on the one hand, no longer having your independence. There were some IUs that appreciated the Inca system because perhaps they were in areas that were prone to fighting, and the Inca military would protect them, right? There's some reciprocity that's happening there, right? You're handing over some produce or some things that you're cultivating or creating. And then on the other side, the Inca political military offers you protection. There are some feudal aspects there, right? Okay, well, what is the mita then? All right. The mita is also other responsibilities that the IU have. And these responsibilities are toward the infrastructure that connects different IUs. It might be repairing roads, aqueducts, the irrigation systems are so complex and cool. Those things needed repair and maintenance. All right. So the mita are these things that you do not just on behalf of your smaller IU, but on behalf of the empire and with attention to the maintenance of the infrastructure that keeps the whole empire together, all right, and running efficiently. Water in, water out, roads are clear and easy to navigate. That's the mita. It's um, your duties toward the larger political system, not just the IU. All right, there you have it. IU, mita, kolka systems. Mitma. Okay, a mitma, and these are not Incas. All right, this is actually an image of Poland under Nazi occupation. Well, why did I choose this picture? A mitma is when an IU is forcibly transferred. So there's something sacred in Andean belief systems about sort of the sanctity of where you were born, with the notions that you were born from the earth. So the forcible transfer of people from those areas was really quite traumatic um, for different IUs and people within the Inca Empire, in the same way that is traumatic for, again, these Polish people who were forcibly transferred under the Nazi Empire. All right. There's really no images of, or even some reconstructions of what Mitma looked like in the context of the Incas. But you should, I don't know, these faces really caught me, and no doubt characterizes the feelings of the people who were forced to leave their IU. There's a lot of reasons why this institution exists. On the one hand, it could be used to force IUs to um, be loyal to the Inca authority. All right. If there are some IUs who were not doing their mitma, or they were not contributing to the storehouses, or maybe doing other things that were even more combative toward the Inca Empire, they could be removed from their land and put somewhere else. And that was an imperial mechanism um, of control. Perhaps there was some collusion happening between a couple of different IUs who were neighboring, who were attempting to team up and combat the Inca Empire. Okay, they would be separated, right? So this is a mechanism that's used among imperial authorities about how do you treat the conquered. All right, it's sort of, in some ways you can award them, and in some ways you can punish them, right? And this is more of the punishing piece. Although there do seem to be instances of mitma in which some IUs who are particularly faithful to the Inca were moved. Well, why did they do that? They tried to move peoples that were all on board with the Inca Empire in areas in which people were potentially less on board, and they almost operated as sort of ambassadors um, of the Inca Empire to show its success. I don't know, but I've always found that a strange notion of forcibly transferring people who are um, loyal, right? Because there is something sacred about the place that you're from, particularly in the context of these Andean peoples who were incorporated into the Inca Empire. So you can imagine that could be a risky move to transfer those peoples. Anyway, Mitma is very important. It's a tool of empire, and I guess that's what I have to say about that for right now. All right, Quipus. I mentioned these storehouses, and there were systems of administration that were able to document what were in which storehouses and how much of it and where it's going or where it needs to go. Um, there was no formal, there was no style of writing. And so one might ask, well, how the heck did they document all of that? Well, they documented it with textiles, all right? And specifically with these things called quipus, all right? And you can see that there's all sorts of different strings, and they're kind of hard to see here, but these strings also have knots on them, all right? So the idea here is, and this was a very important role within the Inca Empire, not everyone could do this, but making the quipus and being able to read the quipus, all right? These are, you know, well, there are a few different things. They can be legal documents. They can indicate who owns what and for how long. They can also, again, as I'm kind of mentioning, offer sort of a database or a catalog of what is where and where it needs to go. All right. So you can see that it's able to communicate letters and numbers. All right. And by the different ways in which the knots are made and where they're made on the strings and all sorts of complicated things I don't quite understand, the quipus are able to communicate really precise information. Is, in my mind, just a very, very fascinating thing here. So yes, this is the record keeping, and this aids empire because if you know which areas are producing what, which areas are low on what, um, you can move materials around, right? And the most efficient way. And the quipus were just a very important asset for that. All right, there's the quipus. Finally, we're talking a lot about storage and transfer of things, but we haven't really given any attention to the infrastructure of how these things are transported. The Inca roads are remarkable. 25,000 miles. And again, these are miles in the sky, much of it. Um, you'll see that there are, and it's kind of hard to read here, but you do have sort of a coastal road. Then you also have the mountain road. And then these pink ones are kind of like smaller roads, I guess, like little tributaries. That might connect the two different roads, or it might connect one of the roads to an important city or town. All right. All in all, 25,000 miles. The Earth's circumference is 24,901. So the roads are basically going around the Earth. There are roads as high as 13,780 feet. All right. And this is the roads themselves, not even any of the buildings, although Machu Picchu is one as well. That's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Machu Picchu. But just the roads are considered a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, which is a very important committee as a part of the United Nations. It's the belief that some historic places have a unique capacity to create world peace. In short, we'll actually do UNESCO projects later next try, but I do want to note that it is a UNESCO site. So these roads and this infrastructure are essential, right? We should predict we have avocados, alpacas, we have arms, we have maize, right? Barley, coca, salt. We have all those things going in and around the empire, moving efficiently, not just resources, but people as well. They could be armies, right? It could be different communication, people running communications. These roads are really the essential driver that allows the empire to effectively run, right? And what is again so remarkable is the fact that again this is mountainous, right? It's a landscape that is absolutely not conducive for the transfer of materials or efficient movements of peoples. And yet, the Inca established these roads and networks that really allowed the empire to run despite its environmental challenges. Certainly not because of them, but despite them. It's actually quite remarkable. I think this is where. Oh, this is the end of the road. Ha, that wasn't even on purpose. All right, I think this is it. This is it. All right, team. I thank you.